What's that? There's a movie coming out this week about a successful superhero with decades worth of stories that I could talk about? I've got a better idea. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Tales Showcase, where 3D glasses aren't a requirement, but if you think they'll help, you're welcome to them. I'm your host, the Watcher of New Earth. Well, Captain Marvel is finally bringing Skrulls into the mainstream, and what should we do to celebrate? Maybe I could talk about their first appearance in the comics, discuss their animosity with the Kree, maybe pontificate about the Secret Invasion storyline? Sure, I could, or...
Marvel Premiere number 35 features the introduction of the 3D Man and was written by Marvel legend Roy Thomas with art by Jim Craig.
Despite being printed in the 1970s, this book actually takes place in the 1950s, essentially retconning this Prismacolor nightmare into existence. So let's ignore the fact that I missed the opportunity to make a video that could finally tie into a successful movie to talk about this instead, and let's get started. This is Marvel Premiere number 35.
The story opens with the 3D Man busting in through a window, surprising the men inside. They ask who this garishly dressed man is, when one of them says it doesn't matter who he is because he won't be around long enough to matter.
Which is no doubt what most of you watching this video are thinking.
A fight breaks out as the apparent leader yells at them to kill the 3D Man. However, he keeps them all at bay, with one of the goons stating that he fights like 3 men. It warms the cockles of my heart to hear you say that, mainly because that is exactly what I am. 3 men rolled into one.
Okay, first, don't mention your cockles ever again. No one wants to hear about them. Second, yes, the 3D Man is not named the 3D Man because he resembles a pair of 3D glasses. He's named that because he's the composite of 3 different people combined into one, and yes, later on in the story we will find out how that happened, but no, it will not make more sense.
3D Man dispatches the last of the crew and turns its attention to the leader. However, when the mystery man mentions the 3D Man's real name, Chuck Chandler, our hero freezes, and as the villain's face distorts, Chandler goes into an extended flashback. Cause that's what you want in a story about the past, a plot device to push us even farther into the past. Anyway, Chandler remembers his college days as a football star, his graduation, and his eventual entry into the US Air Force. Seemingly always by his side was his faithful brother, Hal. Unlike his brother, Hal seems to get the short end of the stick, depicted as a stereotypical 50s nerd, a disability, and heavily hinted to be the least favorite son.
What kind of people shower a sports star with more attention than someone who actually needs it? You know, aside from the American school system. Boom! Gotcha, government! Hashtag resist!
There's even one panel where the narrator says how wonderful it would have been had Hal been born after they found a cure for polio. Which feels kinda depraved coming from the guy who decided to set the story in this era. Anyway, the night before Chuck is supposed to test the experimental XF-13, he, his girlfriend Peggy, and Hal are hanging out at his house. Peggy steps out to the store, saying she'll be back before they can say, "I'll be a dirty bird."
What?
Hal decides to go for a walk, but as he's outside, he sees 3 men run into the house. From the window, he sees them hold Chuck at gunpoint. Apparently, they're communist spies who want the plans for the XF-13. Hal, thinking quickly, uses his crutch through the window to disarm the goon, giving Chuck the opportunity to attack. "Here, commie, take this back to the Kremlin."
Okay. As an action one-liner, that's not the worst.
Chuck and Hal rush out and find Peggy in the driveway. They all climb in and head to the test center, where they spend the night. The following morning, as Chuck prepares, Hal asks Peggy if she'll drive him out to the spot where he always sits and watches Chuck fly. She agrees and then is about to ask him something when he suddenly interrupts her, assuming that she's gonna ask him how long he's been crippled.
Dude, how do you just assume she's gonna ask you that? What if she was gonna ask you how long you've been trying to pull off sweater vests? And also, if she was gonna ask him that, which the comic heavily implies that she was, why would you ask him that? Are you and Chuck like barely starting to date? Have you met him today? Or have you known him for a long time? Is there any appropriate time to ask this? Why would you ask this? You're an awful person, and Hal, take off the sweater vest. It's not working, buddy.
Chuck then comes in, appearing in a ridiculous black suit, which Hal claims is cooler than Marlon Brando in The Wild One.
Full disclosure, I have not seen The Wild One. That said, Marlon Brando eating a bologna sandwich in the middle of North Dakota would be cooler than this suit.
Peggy and Chuck say their goodbyes, with Peggy telling him to be careful and highly suggesting that when he gets back, they're gonna bang it out later.
Maybe wearing an off-brand Black Panther costume is hot. What the hell do I know?
A while later, Hal is in his spot, Peggy at base, and Chuck in the sky. However, as Chuck nears a cloud, he sees a flying saucer. As he goes in to inspect it, the cloud disperses, along with the two ships, to the surprise of everyone. Chuck, however, isn't surprised because he's now in the spacecraft and in the company of, say it with me, the Skrulls!
Vindicated!
The Skrulls apparently know that humans are close to being capable of space travel and have kidnapped Chuck to learn all their secrets. Chuck, however, breaks free and flees to the XF-13, but not before sabotaging one of their weapons and causing a huge explosion. He plummets to Earth, landing near Hal, but before they reach each other, Chuck disappears in a blinding flash of light. Hal reaches for his glasses only to find an imprint of Chuck on each lens. Rather than telling anyone and probably ending up in an asylum, he keeps it to himself, and eventually figures out that if he focuses, he can conjure up a red and green version of Chuck. Chuck realizes he's alive and goes out, also realizing that he now has powers, able to run a mile in 3 times the speed of the world record breaker, and is able to jump 3 whole stories of a building.
Okay. Couple things. So, he's not 3 people combined into one, because that doesn't add up unless one of the Chandler boys had multiple personalities that just never came up, which doesn't really make sense because this comic went through extensive detail into their backlife. You know, arguably enough stuff that we didn't need, and you'd think multiple personalities would have come up. So, you know, that 3-guy thing doesn't add up, doesn't make sense. Chuck it out. If he's 1/3 Hal, though, does he have 1/3 of polio? Does 1/3 of his body have polio? How does that get distributed? Does it? I don't know. Does it matter? Probably not. How can he jump 3 stories in the air? Are you saying that a normal man can jump 1 story in the air? Because me personally, I've only been ever able to reach 6 feet with my vertical leap. Humble brag. Why is he red and green? There's no way that you combine these outfits and get red and green. That's not the natural progression of any form of combination between these. The only way that makes sense is if Hal was wearing 3D glasses at the time, which, you know, doesn't make sense unless that was a style back in the 50s that we just didn't know about. Or the machine made his glasses into 3D glasses. Which also doesn't make sense, because why would it? 3D glasses aren't made of glass. They're like plastic or whatever the heck. I don't know. Frankly, don't care. But what I'm saying is, what I think I'm trying to say is at least that under the base minimum scrutiny, after you ask 1, 2, or 3 questions, this character falls apart completely.
Anyway, the story then comes back to the start as the leader of the Goons is revealed to have been a Skrull the entire time. The Skrull then says that the 3D man will never be sure who he's fighting since they can change their appearance to anyone. Chandler then punches the Skrull out the window where he disappears into the crowd below. Before he can give chase, however, he begins to feel weird and he rushes back to Hal, where he splits back into 2 images as Hal wakes up, realizing he can only become the 3D man for 3 hours at a time. Because, duh. And the comic ends with Hal having nightmares that night, wondering how many of history's monsters were actually Skrulls.
Yeah, pretty darn convenient, huh? The thought that humanity's evil isn't internal and all of us have the potential for evil, but rather that evil is this foreign, alien presence that we have to protect ourselves from because it'll invade us and corrupt us from within, so we all fight each other, which is pretty convenient if you want to protect yourself from any thoughts of impurity. So, Marvel Premiere number 35. It's not very good, is it?
Look, I'm 100% sure that's not the actual message the creators wanted you to walk away with, but it is a really easy, convenient takeaway, so I thought I'd point out the absurdity of it anyway. That said, even aside from the other implications, it's kind of a boring storytelling device to hint that several villains in the universe are not fleshed out characters who became evil through their decisions and circumstances, but instead were evil aliens who were always evil because of evil, which is a problem I have with a lot of early Skrull stuff. And the book doesn't even fall apart there. Why was the whole origin a flashback? Nothing would have been lost if this story had been told linearly. In fact, it might have worked better since we wouldn't have been expecting a twist when he got back to the present, so the whole Skrull reveal would have been mind-blowing. I guess. And I get that the whole comic is going for a fun, goofy throwback feel, but it's just not there. It's not fun. It's boring. Like the 50s probably. Got him. And this is all especially disappointing since it comes from the creative mind of Roy Thomas, who created or helped create several iconic characters. And I guess no one has a perfect record, but this guy will almost certainly be overshadowed by Thomas's other works. Forever.
Maybe I'm wrong though. I haven't read the next issue of this series, but the 3D Man is in it, and apparently our Kodachrome compadre here is going to be finding out the evils of rock and roll. Which I assume, based on this issue, means that he's going to be beating the crap out of Chuck Berry, who turns out to be, you guessed it, a Skrull. So stick around for that. As always, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. This is the Watcher of New Earth, signing off. Hi, I'm the Watcher of New Earth. If you like that video, hit that subscribe button, maybe even the bell icon. It probably does something, right? I mean, YouTube hired someone to put it there, so the least we could do is show appreciation by hitting it.